Thank you so much, Robert, for agreeing to chat with me about your stay at the VCCA. And I look forward to hearing a little bit more broadly about your work as well. So you were the 2019 recipient of the Wachtmeister Award at the Virginia Center for Creative Arts. And I wondered if you could start by telling us a little bit about your project there.
Well, my project was to actually create a new work. And I took advantage of the fact that I was confined at the VCCA for a month, which means that essentially I didn't feel any emergency or urgency to produce a work like that. So I had a lot of time, and I spent most of my time over there to make the sound material of the piece, because I was involved in the process that took me a lot of time. The kind of software I used to make the piece is a stretching software with which you can stretch the sound for over 1 million times if you like. It's a bit absurd, but at the same time, you know if it works only if you listen to the old thing. So if you want to make very complex experiment, I've made sound files that last for 1.5 hours, for example. So to get an idea if it works or not, you have to listen to it.
Yeah.
You don't do that in your real life, you know.
But you can't take a smaller chunk to get an idea of whether it suits you or not. You really need to listen to the entire set.
Well, I didn't know exactly at the time when I was there if I would use the whole duration of all these files or only sections or anything. But my point was to check out if it has any interest over time. So it's about how the sound transforms itself over a long period of time, and to see if it is interesting or not. So this is why I had to add a lot of time to work in that process.
Could you say a bit about your source files and the larger idea of the project?
Yeah, the source files, they were from a show. I was part of a pop singer show a year ago, and I was doing live transformation during the show. That was my role. So I had three sound feeds from the board. One from the singers. There was 3 singers. One from a string quartet, and one from the cello of the main singer and the composer of the show. So I had these three recordings of the whole show. The show lasts for 2 hours. So I just took excerpts of these different recordings. The show was made out of 9 songs, very long songs. One of the songs lasts for 18 minutes, so it's not typical pop music. It's more, it's a bit more experimental, I would say.
Or like music theater.
Yeah. And she's very unique because she sings with no words. She sings only onomatopoeias and sounds. So there's no real stories. There's no meaning really, except in her mind, I think, and probably in listeners' mind too. So the material was quite interesting because it was quite diverse. It was a little bit more abstract than real pop. And and I had a lot of, so essentially the material was quite harmonic, I would say, because it was pitch material for most of it. So it was interesting. So I worked a lot. I made just without putting my process in question at all at any moment. So I was just making sounds and sound and sound, just to see at the end if I superpose them or if I try combination, if it works or not. And at the very end of my stay, I put a sketch, and I asked people if people would be interested to listen to the sketch with me, and everybody came. So
People got that kind of feedback. So
yeah.
what did they think and what did you think?
Well, I thought that it was a sketch at the beginning, so I thought that it was promising. It was not a piece yet, but it was promising, and I got very good comment from the people who were there. Some people were very touched by that. The material is, I would say, touching in itself because it is made out of voice and strings. So it's kind of easy to a point, I would say. It's not pure electronic, synthesized song or anything like that. So it was quite promising. And then I continued to work when I came back home, continued to work on the piece, on the structure of the piece. And I had another residency in France where the piece was premiered in December. And this is where I put the first version of the work. Yes.
And is this one continuous movement?
No, I kept the idea. It's kind of it's very continuous, but there are still 9 movements. It's not the order of the show. I replaced things in different places. It's not the durations, the original. I try at first to keep the proportion of the show, but finally it didn't work. So I just built the whole structure in terms of tension and release. And at some point there's a huge tension and a final release at the end. So at some point I just quit the relationship with the original material and with the original piece to make something completely on my own. Yeah.
So when you were in residence, you also came. We were happy to have you do a talk on your work at the University of Virginia. And you talked a bit about your concept of cinema for the ear. And I was wondering whether it sounds as though this piece works very well in relation to that. And I wondered if you might say a few words about that.
I don't know if this piece is related to the cinema for the ear. Maybe yes, maybe not. I'm not quite sure, because when I did it was the title of my doctorate, Cinema for the Ear. And at the time I was trying to make a parallel between the cinema language and some electroacoustic music language. Because it was in the 90s I did my doctorate. And at the time there was not that many writings about the language of electroacoustic music, how it works. We have intuitions, when you listen to a piece, or if you're part of a jury, or if you are a group of people and you listen to a bunch of pieces. We have intuition. We know that this piece works and this piece doesn't work very well, but it's hard to explain, essentially. But it has certainly something to do with the language itself, or we perceive things. And I thought it could be interesting to just to have a look at the cinema language, because the cinema is also a fixed medium. It's not live. It's not a live art form. And the editing is very important, and the way things are screened and shot and everything. So I thought, and the cinema language is very developed. It has been developed almost from the very beginning. So there's tons of books about cinema language. So I thought, okay, we'll look at that and try to see if we can transpose these elements, the syntax element of the cinema language, to a certain type of electroacoustic music, the music that use sound that are referential, for example, sound that are recorded in the street or wherever, and where you can recognize the sound sources. And maybe in that point, if you can record, if you can remember, if you can recognize the sound of the violin or the sound of the voice, probably it triggers your imagination. You know, it triggers images in your imagination, and probably the cinema for the ear works in that manner.
So I was just wondering, because you use the voice as a source, but it sounds as though this was maybe a more abstract kind of project.
Yeah, it was a bit more abstract. Yeah, that's true.
What's the title of the finished piece?
The Ravishing. Yeah.
So, and getting back to the Virginia Center for Creative Arts, do you have any, what was your experience like there, and what did you think of it as a place to undertake your work?
Oh, it was exactly what I was looking for, I would say. I was working in a very nice studio. Had all my time. I'm not that much of a social person, so at some point, the socialization in the center was a bit more difficult for me. So at some point, I escaped from that a bit. But apart from that, we were completely free to do what we wanted, and there was no specific expectation. That was absolutely great. And I was there for a month, which I considered a fantastic privilege, I would say. I needed that amount of time. And if I compare with some of my colleagues who were there for a week or 2 weeks, I wouldn't be able to make it in such a sort of short period of time. Yeah.
Sure, that question of the duration of a residency, I think, is a really important one. And I know I had the privilege of doing a number of residencies at the VCCA, and one of the things I love is that you can interact with, and that's great, but you can also just go into your studio and shut the door and see no one at all. And
Yeah.
that's a really rare treat, I think, to be able to have that and nothing intruding on you. And also to me, and maybe to you, the beauty of the place, just the trees and the land that it's on and the rural nature of it, coupled with, as you mentioned, beautiful studios and the center to be in residence at. I always find to be inspiring.
Yeah, exactly. And the people who work over there are absolutely fantastic. And, so they are there for the artists. We feel it from day one, and everything is there to support you. It's such a good fantastic.
And of course, it was fantastic that Linda Wachtmeister created this award, and we rotate it on an annual basis, and there is a invited panel of jurists, and it rotates among the different arts, literature, etc. So we were really excited that you were able to join us and to create the work that you created there. So thank you so much for speaking with me today.